It's gonna go right there when it's live. Okay, hello and welcome to a shot in the arm podcast. Here at Women Deliver 2023 in Kigali, Rwanda. My name is Y-Isha Raphael and I am your host for today. Just as a short introduction, one of the largest multi-sectoral convenings to advance gender equality, Women Deliver 2023 has convened over 6,000 people in Kigali and 200,000 plus people virtually through the virtual conference. Women Deliver 2023 aims to enable inclusive and co-created spaces that foster solidarity for sustainable solutions on gender equality. Now, Africa is facing a major demographical challenge. According to recent UN forecasts, the continent is expected to double its population by 2050 from 1 billion to nearly 2.4 billion inhabitants. Most importantly, half of that population is going to be under the age of 25. And my generation is going to be the vanguard actually of that change, particularly us young women. We're refusing to accept the status quo that is holding back our rights, economic and social opportunities, and most importantly, given the current climate crisis, our futures. And joining me today, I'm so deeply honored and excited, is Christine Stechling, who is the Deputy Executive Director at Unaids, guys. High level, okay? So as her Twitter profile, because I don't normally do introductions, but I went to Twitter and I was like, this is just so iconic. So on her Twitter profile, she is written there, Executive Director of UNAIDS, a mother, right? An HIV activist and a human rights defender. And I just love that, straight to the point. Can you give us like hello and welcome, Christine?
Yeah, thank you
And
for
then
having me.
so lovely to have you. Can you give us a brief introduction about yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, as you say, I'm the Deputy Executive Director,
Oh,
one of
okay.
two at Unaids. Really happy to be here. As you also said, I've always worked on HIV and mainly on HIV and human rights. And have come from the civil society sector.
Mm.
And now at UNAIDS, I oversee policy advocacy and knowledge mainly. And yeah, trying to do my best in a very different space.
Mm. No, and let me just say, from what I've observed for yourself as a representative of UNAIDS here at Women Deliver, really you guys are standing out and helping because a main topic, especially amongst HIV activists and advocates here at the conference, is that we are not seen. But I
Mm.
can say that you are doing a good job of every panel that you are on, you're making sure mention that, hey, HIV and AIDS, that is supposed to be a very important topic of discussion. It's not the main topic, but I'll make it the topic. Okay, so let's get right into it. Firstly, by you just letting us know and telling the audience what you guys have been up to here at the Women Deliver Conference as UNAIDS.
Yeah, and maybe I should start where you stopped. So, I've been at Women Deliver before, and it has always been difficult to really come with an HIV agenda to this
Mm,
space. And it
mm,
really surprises me knowing the impact that HIV has on women, and especially young women. And now that we're in Africa, we really thought that there would be more attention on
mm,
HIV. You know, we can't have a large gathering of women
mm.
in Africa and not talk about HIV, but
Yeah.
here we are. So, one of our major objectives has been to talk about HIV. We know that 64% of new infections in Africa were amongst women, almost 50% of new infections worldwide were on the continent. And as you know, we all know, 4,000 new infections every week
Mm,
of young girls and adolescent girls and young women, and 3,200 of those were in Africa.
mm.
So that should be front and center of our mind.
Exactly.
So, what have we been doing here? Lots of different things. We have engaged in many different plenaries and conversations on very different topics. Male engagement. We have talked about this morning. We had a really interesting discussion
Mm,
around HIV as a feminist issue. We've talked a lot here about an initiative that we're running as UNH in 15 countries or with 15 member states
mm,
in Africa called Education Plus. It's about getting girls to finish secondary school. We
mm,
know that is a huge protection against HIV
mm,
infection.
mm,
I met with the people living with HIV community here in
mm,
Rwanda and with key populations on the outsides of the conference.
mm,
We took three of the elders,
mm,
Grassa Machel,
mm,
Ellen Sirleaf Johnson, and Mary Robinson. We accompanied them to a clinic to meet with young women living with HIV and not living with HIV to discuss how they how they experienced COVID and what the impact of COVID had been on them. What else we've talked? I talked on a plenary yesterday around colonial legacy and racism in the development sector. Yeah, I think, and there were many other things.
Yeah.
But
No, it's been a busy conference,
yeah,
guys. Let's be honest.
we're tired.
Yeah, we're tired. It's been a busy conference, but it's clear that what you've been doing, highlighting HIV and AIDS, that is like super, super important work. And like you said, that it's so strange to us. Like we are literally in the exact perfect place, the exact perfect content to talk about HIV and AIDS and make it a highlight, make it an objective. Because 3,200 infections every week.
Of young women.
That is too much. And it's not even the whole population of women, it's just young women
Yeah.
that are affected by this. So it's really worrying when we see that, like we said, we were saying it at today's session, getting the graveyard sessions of either 7 p.m. or 7 a.m. to discuss HIV and AIDS. And it's like, these are the sessions that should be highlighted, put in the auditoriums, that a lot of people should be encouraged to attend, because this is actually a pinnacle issue here in Africa. And it worries me that so many years later, we are still here.
Yeah. And a colleague of mine and our regional director said something quite wise yesterday. I thought, when we talk about gender equality, we can literally use HIV in women as a proxy about how far we have come with gender equality, right? And so then not to make that part or a central part of our conversation while we are in Africa with women and with young women. There's a lot of young women here. We really need to do better, and we need to integrate it in all our conversations. We can't talk gender equality and not talk HIV, and we can't talk HIV if we don't talk gender equality. It's as easy as that.
Yeah. Okay. So you said that you went into the communities where people have been affected by HIV and AIDS. So I want to know from you, what is your perspective being at Women Deliver, because the focus is on young women, particularly young women. What is the impact that you've seen? And I'll put it in the context of your visit, the impact that you've seen that HIV and AIDS has had on young women and girls.
Not just in Rwanda, you mean generally?
Yeah, just in generally, but maybe you can have your visit in the back of your mind.
Actually, when we start with the visit, we had a conversation with a number of young women, and a lot of them, not on purpose. I think I can't remember what the criteria was, how they got there, but quite a number of them were living with HIV, and it was almost always the same story. There was a teenage pregnancy or a very early pregnancy. There was an HIV infection. Lots of them still talked about having been rejected by their families, having been rejected by their husband or the father of the child. And then, real stories of struggle. Well, the health system here is really good, and they get the right support in terms of ARVs. Everybody here gets treatment when they test positive. The clinic, amazingly, they haven't had PMT, they haven't had mother to child transmission cases for years. There's a real good infrastructure here from the health system. But then the issues around stigma, family rejection, rejection in the community, and food security, being really struggling really to feed themselves and in most cases their babies, is something, I feel it's almost like we hear these stories for so long now, where you think like, it is actually quite easy what we know, not easy, but it is quite obvious what we know about young women and HIV, right? The vulnerability comes from poverty, from structural issues such as violence, such as sexual violence, and so forth, forced marriage or forced relationships, early pregnancy. And the real issue around food insecurity and economic insecurity, that you just have no place where you can actually find employment or a way to not just survive, but to be who you want to be. And I think that still makes me quite sad that we're still in that place where we still hear those stories. I think Rwanda is we show Rwanda in our latest report as one of the countries who's done really well on HIV. I think it's quite an exemplary country in terms of how it looks after its people. But we know that, even here there are pockets, and we know pockets always exist where there are structural inequalities,
Mm,
and women are often
mm.
at the very end of structural
Yeah.
inequalities, right?
No, so you actually got into my next question,
Okay.
which was actually to ask, have we made progress in the last 4 decades in reducing infections, in reducing prevalence? And it's clear, like you say, Rwanda is like the perfect example of what to do as a country to reduce infections and support with healthcare, with counseling, support with ARVs and stuff like that. But clearly there's a gap. And in that gap, we have to try and figure out. And I want to ask you, what should the strategy be going forward in order to close the gap intersectionally? Because, like you say, okay, they have ARVs, but they're not able to feed themselves and their kids. And you can have the medication, but if you don't have any food to eat, you're still going to end up in the same place anyway. So, what is the strategy going forward with that?
Yeah. And I think so, just to flag our new report, which we issued last week, which is called A Path to End AIDS. So we're saying very clearly as UNAIDS, there is a path to end AIDS as a public health threat. There's 5 countries in the world that are on this path solidly, Rwanda being one of them, Botswana, Eswatini, Tanzania. I'm always forgetting the fifth one. Um, so you can reach the targets that we have set, and the recipe is quite easy, but because we know what to do, we know what the right prevention technologies are, we know that we need to put people on treatment as soon as they're tested, we know that people need to test, we know we need to address structural barriers. All of those things can only happen if there's political will and if there are resources. And I think that's what we're saying in the report. If you have those 2 ingredients, you can make it. And we're trying to encourage countries to follow in the footsteps of other countries. But what you're saying is, what we're seeing across the world is over and over, and in on the continent where so many young girls and adolescent girls and young women are affected, we need to look broader than HIV. HIV is maybe for many at the center. It is partly a health and social intervention, but what we need is a broader look at people. What do people need? People need food, people need jobs, people need safety, people need housing. And I think that's part of our kind of view of the world as UNAIDS now, to say we need to be people-centered. One of the things that struck me this morning in the conversation, sorry to the listeners who
Yeah.
weren't there this morning, it was a really good conversation about HIV as a feminist issue. But what struck me was also, we at UNAIDS, we do talk a lot about prevention and the importance of really closing the prevention gap, right? We still have, last year we had 1.3 million people newly infected. We still had a person die of AIDS every day in 2022. All of this is unnecessary, right? We know what to do. There are slight reductions. There is a trajectory that is positive, but it's not positive enough, right? We should be, our targets are in 2 years' time, we should have less than 300,000 infections a year. And even that we shouldn't have anymore.
Yeah.
We should be
Aiming for zero.
aiming for zero, exactly. So so where I'm going with all of this is, yes, we know what to do, but we need to reset ourselves a little bit, and we need put people in the middle of that. Oh no, I was going to talk about the young woman this morning who really reminded me, UNAIDS, you talk a lot about prevention, and I personally talk a lot about prevention. And she said, don't forget, there's a lot of us young people who are on treatment, who are doing all the right things, but we have struggles. We might not have the right treatment regimens, or we don't have food security, or we don't take meds because we have no food,
Yeah.
so we stretch it, and giving us a reminder that there is so much more that we also need to do with the large population of people who are living with HIV and who are on treatment. And yes, that is always on my mind. As you know, I used to run the Treatment Preparedness Coalition.
Yeah.
But I do think there is a point there that maybe we have shifted our gaze a little bit too much towards prevention without ensuring that we also pay attention to people living with HIV on treatment and what are the long-term support needs of people.
No, that's really insightful. And I was just about to ask you actually about the report that was released from UNAIDS. And besides everything that you've said just now, obviously to answer my previous question, what else would you like to highlight about the report?
I think one other interesting part of the report is an attempt to be more, to try and be more, provide more disaggregated data. We know we often make very sweeping statements.
Yeah.
Adolescent girls and young women. Who are these adolescent girls
Mm.
and young women? Are they all heterosexual? No.
Mm.
Are they are they sex workers? Are they involved in drug use? You know, being more, really being more careful to really look at micro data and data at district level and even sub-district level, because if we want to close the gaps and we want to know who we are missing, you know, children is a good example, right? Still over 650,000 children not accessing treatment, right? Where are those children? And some of the data that you find is in the report is us trying to be, and we're not there yet, but we're on a journey of providing more and more granular data, especially for governments who are looking into doing the right programming. Because what we also all know is that we mustn't waste any resources. We really need to get the programs where you know, whether it's testing or it is prevention services or it is treatment, where the people are. And so you know, using those data sets to really look at the most granular level for policymakers and for communities.
That actually now leads me again into my next question, which really, like you said, microdata, which speaks to locally led development. And the topic, another topic that's also been in the air at the conference is doing development differently, really switching our focus from that one office in a European country that's saying, oh, funding here, funding here, funding here, to really saying, okay, these are the communities that are affected. They're facing different issues in each of their contexts, whether it's in different countries, whether it's in different communities, different villages, but each context is going to be completely different. How, what are your thoughts actually on doing development differently?
So in my previous job, I did a lot of work around that. How do we reset even international civil society networks to work differently? And I'm not going to go into that, but I fully agree. I think the time has come to really face our demons about how we have been doing development. And I spoke on a plenary about it yesterday. So one is really a real personal understanding about where is my place in this as a white, privileged, middle-aged, middle-class woman coming with a certain set of biases and ideas to the table. So I think, you know, that is a very personal journey, but I think everybody is asked to make that journey so that, you know, when you come to a table, you suggest new solutions, you know where that comes from, but also in your everyday life. That's one thing, a bit to the side. But I think there is a shift. It's too slow, but I think everybody's thinking differently at the moment. You know, even at Unaids, you know, not when I was there, when I came, at the end of what Unaids has done recently, we've really tried to relocate. A lot of our staff are no longer at the Global Center in Geneva. 82% or so of our staff are now at country or regional level. That's a clear sign to say, and you're not a regional person or a country person, you belong to the global team. We can do that. We've learned that in COVID, how to do that, right? So we don't all need to sit in Geneva, London, Washington, apart from that is problematic in and of itself, but it's small changes, right? And then really to think about, and I said that this morning already, we shouldn't beat ourselves up too much. I think as the HIV movement, we have reset a little bit how development is done. We have found ways of saying it should be countries, and countries is not governments. Countries is all of society deciding what is needed, have the right data, have the right evidence, and then decide what they need for their country. And that's what we have done with the Global Fund. That's a model that it's not perfect. There's always challenges, but the idea behind it was not for a donor to tell a country what to do, but also to say a country is not just a government. It needs to be inclusive, and we can only end AIDS as a public health threat if we're inclusive. So I think we have some seeds for doing development differently in the HIV movement that we should build on.
Okay. So do you think that doing development differently, as you said, how does this tie in with the report that was just published by Unaids?
Hmm, that's an interesting question. I think one of the things you will see from UNAIDS and where we put a lot of our emphasis is around how do we create sustainable HIV responses.
Mm,
And that is part of ending AIDS as a public health threat.
mm,
Even if we had no new infections, we all knew
mm,
that every country that had an HIV epidemic will, for many years to come, have to run HIV programs, right?
mm,
Keeping
mm,
people on treatment, serving people on treatment, but also ensuring that there are no new infections. But who should run those programs? Who should be in charge of
mm,
those governments, our own governments? And they should be investing in our own
mm,
citizens,
mm,
right? That's how it should be. So what we are doing at the moment at UNAIDS is doing a lot of conversations around how does sustainability, not just financial, but programmatic, people sustainability, but
mm,
also financial sustainability looks like in the long term. And that is in a context where many of our countries are in very difficult financial positions, right? We know we keep on saying countries must invest more. A lot of countries invested a lot in HIV.
mm,
More than 50% of the HIV response globally is paid by domestic funding.
mm.
It's going down because of the aftermath of COVID and the
Yeah.
economic shocks. But we were on the right path. We weren't there, but we were on the right path. But that's where we want to get to, right?
Mm,
That is doing development differently. It's not coming from with donor funding
mm,
into other countries to determine how we respond to a pandemic. It should be our own governments in our own countries. But it is made difficult in a situation where so many countries are in debt distress and are
mm.
facing difficulties. And so we're trying to be part of the conversation about what does sustainability look
Yeah.
like in the future. And that needs to be a national, a local conversation. It's not a donor conversation. And I think UNAIDS has an important role to play in that
Mm,
conversation.
mm. Okay, so Christine, you are a UN leader from the community, co-founder of the Bonella in Bots, ITPC, and Frontline AIDS. How important is it that institutions like UNAIDS have people from the communities leading their own programs and strategies?
It's super important. It's unusual, I
Mm,
think, at my level. I think, when I was announced, I think that there was a bit of somebody coming from civil society
mm,
being announced
mm,
as an assistant secretary general. But it's amazing, and I think kudos to the leadership who did that
mm,
and gave me that opportunity. It gives us a chance. An opportunity. It is my responsibility now not to lose the
mm,
connection and the feedback mechanisms
mm.
with the
Yeah. Mm,
communities. And I said that this morning.
mm,
You need to hold me accountable, but you need to also help me to make that
mm,
space meaningful
mm,
for communities. But at I need to personally be very careful that I not become an international bureaucrat,
yeah.
but
Mm,
make that space.
mm,
I come to that space the very same way as I have been in every other space. But how better, when I sit in conversations and people talk about national AIDS responses. I sat for 8 years on a national AIDS council with the president of Botswana. It was tough. It was
mm,
tough sitting there in the 2000s. It was good.
mm,
It was at a different and a difficult time in the AIDS response, but it was tough as civil society.
mm.
So I know exactly how it feels. I sat on the CCM for
Yeah.
many years. I
Mm,
implemented many global fund programs. I have worked on intellectual property rights and access to medicine. So all of that in every conversation I'm having, I'm bringing in. And also I know how to very quickly call the community.
mm,
When there is a crisis in Uganda,
yeah.
I have to just open my phone and call the
Mm,
community and say, how can we be helpful? What are the two things I can do to help, right?
mm. No, that's really important. And I think, like you say, that um, it's important for you to be in the position that you're in. And it's also important that you are that connection to the community and for them to be able to hold you accountable, but also to hold you up and support you. Because, like you say, coming from civil society, not everybody's going to be happy to have you there. They're going to be like, oh, this one is going to come with her activism and her do good nature and wanting to help everyone. And that's not what we do here. But the community has to hold you up and support you so that you can make those tough decisions and be brave in those rooms. And speaking on that, the position that you are in currently, the work that you've done, what advice would you have for young women in global health?
Mm. What advice would I have? I think, I'm often amazed when I'm in these spaces. I'm also a
Mm,
mother of a young woman, though she's still too young to
mm,
be any kind of activist, I think. I think there's so much good energy, so many of the young women I hear here, often I think like, oh my God, I want to speak like you when I grow up. Like women are so articulate and so clued up and I sometimes feel like totally inadequate when I stand next to them thinking, oh, I didn't even think about that yet. So there is so much energy and wisdom and intellectual wisdom in the room. So there is a lot that we should tap into. But then I also look at them and I think, wow, this world is tough. How are you going to find your way in? I have an 18-year-old boy who keeps on asking me, how did you decide what you're going to do when you grow up?
Yeah.
And I can't even remember how it happened. But I was privileged, right? I took a year out. I did all these things. For many people, that's not the place they're in. So one is find the thing that you really feel passionate about, because I think when you speak from the heart and when you act from the heart, you're always going to find a place to engage. I think networking is always good. Don't be shy, be heard. Don't feel like you have nothing to say. Don't speak with I always say to people when they say, but I don't talk like somebody else, I'm like, that's not what we need. If everybody talked the same way, the world will never change. Be yourself, be proud where you are, but don't be shy. Come to people like me and say, can you help me? Can you mentor me? I think I said it yesterday. Pumzile said in the opening ceremony, there's a special place in hell for women who don't make space for other women. And it's very true. And we need to make space for young women, and young women must come and claim it and mentor. Many of us must mentor young women and help them on the way, because it is tough out there. I don't ignore that, but there's also lots and lots of opportunities, and you're one of those who have grabbed that opportunity. And also, you all engage so differently. You're doing podcasts, you're doing your own enterprises, you're doing all these other things. It's not only about going to university and following the same path we have all followed, because the world is a different world now. And I feel like a lot of young women who are here who speak like they have done 3 PhDs have never even seen a university from the inside. So education comes in many ways.
No, that's so true. And I'm glad. I'm actually surprised. We kept it short and sweet, but we achieved a lot. But no, that's really insightful, and I'll really take that advice into my heart as someone who's working in global health and hoping to do more in global health. That's my passion. I'll take that into my heart, and I hope that anyone that is watching or listening is gonna take that into their heart as well and realize that hey, there is space for you. Don't worry. Don't think that oh, it's only for the people who studied and went and did PhDs. Like you said, some of us are speaking on topics not because we went to school and studied, but because those are our experiences. So that is it, guys, for our episode today. Thank you so much
Thank you for
for
having
blessing
me. So
us with
much
your
fun.
presence. Yeah, I've had fun. Just a reminder that a Shot in the Arm podcast is a project of the Global Listening Project. So thank you once again to Christine for joining me. And thanks also to our executive production team, Ben Plumley and Eric Espera in California. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcast from and give us 5 stars. I think we deserve it. I will be back later on today with another guest. We're going to be talking about inequalities and violence. It's going to be a heavy discussion. So make sure to stay tuned for that. It's going to be later on in the day. Obviously, I'm your host, Y-Isha Raphael, and I'm signing out. Bye bye, and thank you.
Bye bye.